welcome everybody. Thursday night, our next webinar line, and it's about diversity. This particular webinar was sort of a challenge put to me as I was having some discussions the last couple of weeks, and it came out of friends of mine who happen to be rowing coaches and happen to be of color. And what came out of it was they're exhausted by every person that they know, calling them and asking them, you know, what to do, what should we do, what should we say? And so the challenge was put to me, was one of my friends put to me was, you know, like, instead of trying to figure out how to whittle this down to an exact answer on a problem that doesn't have an exact solution, and to put money into very limited spaces, that maybe we should look within the 1,400 plus clubs in the country and say, if we collectively made changes, if we collectively looked within and thought about where we could be more welcoming, where are the unseen, what are the obstacles that we don't mean to put up as clubs? Where are we putting these up? And maybe if we took a little bit more reflection and looked within instead of looking for answers without, that we would move the needle in a much more definitive way, and a transformative way. That, you know, if instead of trying to make a new club here or a new club there that just created another Row New York or another PCR or another Row Boston, instead of making a place that just filled a gap, when, you know, that's part of the problem, right? And having these separate but equal places fills a gap, but it doesn't move the needle. What if 1,400 clubs looked within and made changes that were more transformative? And so instead of having another 100 rowers join us, we could have 2,800 rowers if 2 new rowers for every club showed up. And so, you know, that was the challenge put forth to me. So instead of reaching out and trying to find, you know, some answer or some Band-Aid or somebody who happened to be of color to bring on here and talk about this, what I did was I reached out to big clubs and clubs that have programming already, and maybe we can look within all of our 1,400 plus clubs that already exist and find ways to talk about this, to start conversations, and to look within and see where we can be better, which is what we have to be. We have to be better. So, and it shouldn't have taken the last couple of weeks to bring us to this moment, but here we are. So it is what that is what it is. So tonight we have some great speakers with us. Delany Pelz from the George Pocock Rowing Foundation. I knew I was going to say it wrong, Delany. I'm sorry. And you have some great background on the topic. We have Ted Benford from CRI. You know, obviously runs the largest club that I've ever heard of or seen, with massive amounts of programming. And so there's a lot of perspective for Ted to offer. Matt Logue spent 6 or 7 years, if Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, at Row New York and is now at 3 Rivers. And so you've got, you know, started in Buffalo, one of the heartlands of rowing that goes back so long in the United States. We have 2-wheel Botts now. I'm not really sure what to make of this. Are you guys seeing this too?
Yeah, sorry. My Wi-Fi cut out, so I left and then came back as Coach Bott, apparently. But yeah, my name is Will. So,
all right, so Will Bott joins us from Milwaukee, and that's his twin brother, Will and Bill. So we have those two. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to extend this challenge to all of us and find ways that we can share and talk and discuss and you know, not shy away from the hard questions and not shy away from the awkward moments, and see if we can dig in and move forward on this together. Before, if I forget later, we have another diversity talk tomorrow. It will be a talk that is sponsored by Rowing in Color, and it is going to be a panel talk with 10 Black coaches and or athletes, and they're going to talk about their experiences in the sport that we all love. That'll be tomorrow night at 7. It'll be on the webinar, and there's a link. You don't have to be a member or any of that, so there's a link on our front page. So let's start off with, we talked earlier today, guys, and Delany, we thought we would start off with you. So introduce yourself, please, and let's have it.
Chris, like Chris said, my name is Delany Pelz. I use she, her pronouns, and I currently work as the Scholarships and Community Partnerships Manager at the George Pocock Rowing Foundation in Seattle, Washington. I do know that there are some plans for Heather Alschler to talk about ERGET at a later date. I'll also be touching on that program, which is one of our main programs. But I'm also going to focus a little bit of what I talk about, where my work with the GPRF has been grounded, which is in a nutshell, kind of thinking outside of the box and really pushing on questions that are important to keep in mind when you're working on or thinking about making systemic and systematic changes within rowing structures, specifically within boathouses. Before I get into that, I know we talked about this earlier, and I know Chris briefly touched on why this panel is what it is. But I do know that if I were watching this and looking at this, I know that I would not be thinking some very flattering thoughts of everyone on this panel. And I think we just need to really actively acknowledge that and say, look, this is a panel of 5 white people talking about diversity. And I think that's, very telling about our current state in the sport and probably the country as well. And we really need to lean into that discomfort and think about it. Verbally acknowledging it is really important. And I think that to follow that up, I'd like to challenge everyone to, instead of focusing on the here and now, to take that discomfort or that kind of like, okay, this is really weird. 5 white people talking about diversity, probably not experts in this field. Take that and then kind of apply it into the future and always think about it, always acknowledge it. Whenever you're in a group of exclusively white leaders or decision makers or people who have been centered in that position, maybe it's every board meeting, maybe it's every staff meeting, maybe it's every coach's meeting every day before practice. Think about it, acknowledge it, and just continue to do that until you don't really have to do that, but then keep doing that because you're going to always have to do it. So that's the first action step for anyone who just needs something to write down as an action. Make thinking about and addressing diversity within your own organization and the spaces you occupy a priority. Make it a habit and make it important for your community at every level, not just relying on some individuals. As a disclaimer, I speak very quickly for some people and I get very excited about things, so sometimes my mouth runs away, but I'm going to try and keep it concise because I do want to share the space and be respectful of everyone's time this afternoon/evening. So I distilled kind of what a lot of my conversations with people tend to revolve around into a couple different points. I will touch on some access and thinking about inclusion points. I'll talk about who gets to be a rower. And yes, I do put gets to be in quotation marks on purpose, and otherness in rowing spaces. A little bit on coach and staff recruitment, and then on listening and collaboration. Very, very briefly, I'm always happy to continue those conversations at a later date with anyone. So right back up to the top, thinking about barriers to access, both visible and invisible. I know that for me, a lot of what hops to mind first off is the financial barrier. We know this is a very expensive sport and it continues to get more expensive. Pretty much a first answer to that is going to be scholarships, but thinking beyond just providing scholarships and having them as an option and kind of pushing against what do they actually cover? How robust are they? Are they comprehensive, or is it really just dollars for a program? Are they subject to the whims of, do we have leftover operating costs, or do you have a dedicated fund that is untouchable, that is always there when it's needed? And then I think I would also really include a gentle reminder to check your biases in the context of scholarships and how you hand them out and who gets them. As far as implicit biases, I will put some resources into the chat. I think all panelists and everyone, great. So these are some useful things that I have definitely used when thinking about these. I have included Project Implicit from the Harvard University. There are a few problems with the IATs from them, which Scientific American touches on. So if you want to explore that, head over to those links to get started. Preferably not right now. There's more that people are going to say. Moving along with some barriers, definitely transportation. Thinking past just, are we making carpools an option to, are we on a bus line? If people are using the bus, how do they get to our boathouse using a bus? If we are on a bus line, how far from a bus stop are we? Do we have young athletes in the evening walking to a bus stop 6 blocks, or is the bus stop across the road from the boathouse? Thinking about other things like cabs and Lyft and Uber. Lyft and Uber technically, legally, are not supposed to provide their services to people under the age of 18, but they do. And just really processing through the different ways that people get to and from your boathouse. Another barrier that I think kind of pops up, but not that often in conversation, are the familial or cultural responsibilities that some of our athletes do have. Examples that pop to mind, very specifically, athletes observing Ramadan. We definitely had an athlete who was attempting to do this during regionals one year. And I encourage everyone to really think about how you would respond to that situation and how you would support that athlete to make sure that they felt like they were able to fully participate in Ramadan and not feel ostracized for that. And then kind of another example that comes to mind are athletes who are considered primary caretakers in their family. There are some family structures where younger members of the family do participate and take care of their siblings. And that may affect their ability to show up to practice. So just kind of thinking about ways that we can be more flexible in determining how we work with our athletes when they're showing up, when they're able to show up, and how that can affect the way you're training your team. Gear and clothing, another kind of subtle barrier in a way. I think there are oftentimes pieces of gear or clothing that can be perhaps unintentional or accidental markers of wealth. And they can also be markers of lack of wealth. And that can be a very difficult kind of subtle social dynamic to manage. So thinking about things like splash jackets, if they are a required piece of equipment for them to race, are you making it possible to provide people, or are you assuming that they're going to get it on their own? And then to wrap up these barriers, swimming is usually one that definitely pops up. Things to think about with this: access to pools. Are there private pools near your boathouse, or are there public pools near your boathouse? Is there a fee to take a swimming lesson? Is there a fee to take a float test? Are there lifeguards who speak other languages who could provide those for athletes who show up there and need that? Knowing where the pools are, always a huge thing. Having a map of where pools are is very helpful. And then making sure that athletes have the time to take the lessons if they need to. I think sometimes people can forget that it takes time to learn how to swim, just like it takes time to learn how to row. So if they want to start rowing right away, yes, they'll probably have to be wearing a life jacket while they're doing it until they pass their swim test. They also need to have time to go take the swimming lessons so they can pass the swim test and hopefully progress past wearing a life jacket. So thinking about, okay, maybe 3 days a week they're rowing, and 2 days a week we say, yep, you're not coming to practice on these 2 days, you're going to your swimming lessons. And then partnering with pools, schools and parks department, locations where there is water access and where they probably already have some structures in place to help kids get that water access. Moving along to the idea of who gets to be a rower, I do think that as a culture, there is a tendency to really focus on kind of what someone might think of as a typical rower profile. And rethinking and redefining how we think about that is particularly important. I know I just mentioned life jackets, and I think that's actually a really good example of this. There is a little bit of a stigma around people who use different items, gloves, life jackets, in order to experience rowing. And I think the really important thing to remember is if that's what makes them feel safe, if that's what makes their rowing experience a good one, then that's what they need to do it, and that's fine, and we need to support them in that. You know, we don't want to make assumptions, and we don't want to force them to validate their experience to us. We really never know the invisible battles that someone else might be experiencing, and we don't know, you know, why they're using those. So we definitely want to be careful about how we approach situations like that. And then I think also another definition, and I know, I think in 2018, this was a conversation topic at the convention, the US Rowing Convention, about rowers who are on ergs, and the definition of who is a rower. And I think for me, because prior to my current role with the GPRF, I ran Seattle Erg Ed, which is a brilliant program. It is a national program where sets of 20 ergs are brought into PE classrooms in a school district, and students in the PE classroom are able to take part in rowing via a curriculum-based 5-day program that just slots right in along with other PE units, and was designed to fit in with those PE units and meet standards and curriculum standards in PE. So Erg Ed is really, really amazing, because what it does is it bridges a little bit of a barrier between people who might not be accessing the water or people who don't want to access the water. And so I think that the rowers on the ergs we shouldn't have to validate them, but I think we do need to make an active point to say, yeah, you know, if you only row on an erg, that's still rowing. Your hand is on a handle. And this is really important to me specifically. I used to teach in these classrooms, and I think what you see there are the adaptive students in those classrooms, and it's definitely something that I hope a lot of people can really think about, and that when a kid who has not been able to participate in the basketball unit or the badminton unit or the soccer unit can sit down in front of an erg and participate in some way, that is so powerful. And negating that experience is just really, really wrong, honestly. So I think it's important to validate people who use an erg as their primary form of rowing. And, you know, clearly there is a very large group of people who do that. There are international competitions on the erg. And I think to wrap up this section, and I just want to be mindful of time here, I really encourage everyone to think about the perspectives and what you expose yourself to in media that you're consuming, both in social media, as well as print media and other types of taking in information. Whether you're a huge nerd like me and like to go and research academic journals or not, I think you can really control what comes to you. And, you know, that can be good and bad. You definitely, especially on social media, the algorithms will get you. If you only follow one type of person, that's the only kind of ad you're going to see. That's the only kind of suggested account you're going to see. So really broadening that and making sure that you're following other people and other organizations. And I primarily function on Instagram. I'm a millennial, it's a thing. So I'll include some Instagram handles here in the chat, but I also encourage other people to really kind of think further than Instagram, especially people who are not on Instagram. Absolutely share things, please. Speaking to coaching and staff recruitment, I think this one is a little bit tough because it is such a niche sport and you do need some very specific skills to be able to coach on the water. But I do encourage people to think kind of past that. And I know there are programs who do this, which is why I think it's such an exciting thing and has proven really effective. Think about where your coaches come from and what says that we have to have boathouses full of rowing coaches. I think there is space in programming to include strength coaches or land coaches who are athletic trainers or fitness people from local gyms or communities. And I very specifically mean Black and people of color coaches from gyms and communities surrounding you. Because I think it gets said a lot, but I think you can't say it enough. Representation matters. And your athletes, especially youth athletes, need to see themselves represented at all levels of your organization, whether that's your coaches or your board or your management committee and your staff, if you have admin staff that is separate from others. like other than your coaches. So I think that's really important. And I encourage people to follow fitness professionals. I'll include more Instagram handles, all about the Instagram. And I do want to make note of Fear Her Fight Athletics from Tacoma. They are near and dear to my heart because I do love Tacoma. But they are very focused on intersectionality in athletic spaces. And if you are unfamiliar with that term, it was coined in 1989 by Dr. Kimberly Williams Crenshaw. And I have linked something for you to read so you can learn more about that term if you would like, if you're not already familiar. Back to coaching and staff recruitment. Where does your staff come from? I think a lot of us tend to rely on our networks, and the rowing network is very small. You are 6 degrees away from anyone at any given point in time. But I do encourage people to kind of look outside of the rowing community and the people you know who are invested in and love rowing, because I think anyone can get invested in and love rowing. So partner with local organizations that are focused on connecting professionals from Black and communities of color with job opportunities. Make sure that the announcements you're putting out show up in other spaces like community centers. I do have a note to talk about where does your board come from, but I'm going to pass that off directly to Rowing in Color, which I hope all of you are listening to them. And if you're not, they're available on Stitcher, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, and you should definitely hop on board that train. We stand Rowing in Color. And they put out episode 20 today with David Banks, and he directly addresses board members and recruiting. And I encourage you to head over there, listen to that. Because I will be honest, I have never recruited a board member. So not my area. To wrap it up, because I do want to pass this off, I think one of the most important things that we as a rowing community do relatively well, because it is inherent in our sport, you do have to listen a lot in this sport, and usually to coxswains, and I am a coxswain, so thank you for listening. But it is really important to listen first and foremost. And it's probably one of the things that you can put into action right away as an individual. Think about who you're listening to, how you're listening to them. If you're in a position where you are able to bring people into decision-making spaces, think about how all the facets of your boathouse are represented. You know, if you have a juniors team, do you have youth representatives? I'm sorry, my cat is having the crazies right now, if you can hear her scrabbling. Very distracting. Do you have junior representatives in any decision-making capacity? If you share a boathouse with other community groups or other teams or other sports, do you talk with them in your shared space about your shared space? And I do think, yes, there are some decisions that don't need to be made in an open forum. You don't have to have a roundtable discussion about exactly what angle to put a chevron on an oar. But I do think that there's a lot of space for more collaboration. We don't need to silo rowing into its own little space, because it already does a little bit by being on the water. And to wrap everything up, if you have listened to nothing I say, if you have ignored all of my links, or if I speak too quickly for you, I really, really want you to stick with this phrase as a really just your jumping off point. And this is a phrase that has stuck with me throughout all of my work. It was brought up by a classmate in a class that I took with the city of Seattle on civic engagement for residents of the city. And the phrase is very typical in DEI work, and it pops up a lot. It is, don't make decisions about me without me. And that is just hands down, if that is the only thing you remember, please remember that. And I don't know, put it up on the wall where everyone can see it, because it is really important that, not just that people see themselves represented, but that they are heard and that their voices are there. And I will pass it off. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Delany. Can I ask you a question about the Erg Ed program real quick? The question on here is, how many athletes transition from Erg Ed down to the water? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I am going to be very candid and very honest. That was not a data marker that was tracked. The Erg Ed program pretty much exploded very, very quickly. And the GPRF staff is very small, continues to be very small. And that is, I mean, that's obviously a space that we really should have been focused on, and we didn't prioritize it, and we should have. And yeah, like there's no rationale for that. There's no anything other than an apology. Yes, we should have been tracking that data point, and hopefully in the future that is something that is very, very clearly marked down and tracked with boathouses, because the boathouses have to participate in order for that data to be tracked.
Well, it's one of the things about millennials, and you don't need to apologize for being one. As an old dude, I would say that one of the things that you do amazingly well is think outside the box. And I think you started us off tonight with a lot of ways to think about things, or places to look, or new people to talk to that I think some of us stuffy older people, we get too comfortable about the way we've always done it, and change doesn't come easy. But you also alluded to boards and getting boards involved. And it just so happens that we have Mr. Ted Benford here, who is going to come on, batting second in the lineup, and talk about how to get the boards behind you. So Delany, thank you, and Ted, welcome.
Thank you, Chris, and Delany, thank you so much for your words and your information. I continue to be amazed by the incredible, like Delany said, sort of the networking, and there are 6 degrees of separation, but I think sharing information like this is just amazing. And I've been taking screenshots because I am completely a troglodyte, so I'll type it in and try to make sure I get it right. The one thing I would add also in the preparation for this conversation is the discussion around boards. So I'm going to keep my comments restricted to that. And I would also put a shout out for the Richard Butler rowing in color conversation about boards. That was also just for me, it was a particularly poignant part of the conversation around what's happening these days. So I'm going to frame my conversation really almost as sort of a case study to be somewhat practical. I think the thing that I'm hearing a lot from many, many different corners of the people that I'm in contact with is around action. And so when we were talking about what to present tonight with regard to sort of both looking at hard questions and also having difficult conversations, I volunteered to share a little bit about how CRI came to the amendment of its mission, sort of a refinement of its mission, and also an amendment of its core values. And to begin, takes me back to sort of a time at CRI in 2016 when I started, and early 2017 when there were particular challenges among the staff and across the organization with regard to gender and LGBTQ concerns about safety, personal safety, communication, transparency. What came out of the experience of hearing from people around how hard it is to even have a conversation. I would suggest for people who are looking for ways to help inform your boards or to talk to your boards about how to begin the conversation around making your boathouse either more diverse or your organization more diverse, is to really look at 2 things that were suggested to me in this in the context of race. First is the accountability of your current actions and the actions that have brought you here. So many people want to get to solutions, and one of the things that I learned through the process of the experience that I've had at CRI, and I'll get to the board stuff in a minute, the policies, the culture, the intention, the language around how people conducted themselves and around addressing the current state is a significant step that shouldn't be overlooked when we're talking about solutions. If we don't acknowledge what we're doing now and have a non-defensive conversation about mistakes, about intrinsic bias, about organizational bias, about race blindness, around white saviorism, around the really hard conversations that people feel particularly unprepared to speak about in as productively and non-defensively as they can. I think the conversation about what to do next gets much, much harder, because people will want to respond to what they feel and how they think the organization should do something without communicating what it is that's actually put them in this space, which is particularly painful and incredibly vulnerable. And I'm talking about board members, I'm talking about, in CRI's case, trustees, I'm talking about our staff, our senior staff, and our participants and the beneficiaries of all the work we do. I think the other thing to recognize is that at the board level, not only is it looking at the hard questions around what has brought the organization to a place where the board needs to respond to this stuff, but is also around how to manage the difficult conversations so that they can actually create a productive outcome. And for us, what we did was get professional help. I spoke with our staff through a Zoom call earlier this week, and one of the things that I sort of shared with the staff in my own sense of lack of preparation for some of the conversations that I've had is, there are a lot of rowers out there who, when you look at sort of just learning how to row, you're not going to pull a significantly good time, and you're going to make mistakes that are potentially what you think is the right thing to do. And until you get coaching and you understand that your intuition may actually be incorrect, and you need someone to actually guide you through the process of learning how to use your legs and then your core and then your arms, which is completely counterintuitive to most people when they first learn how to row. If we don't have that, if we don't use that as potentially a safe conversation around how to actually talk about these difficult discussions and these difficult topics, and we don't have a coach when we go through this, and we're just trying to do it alone because the meters changed or the split got improved when I pulled my arms really hard with the catch, I think the acknowledgement that we need help with this stuff is an enormous part of helping your board and helping your organization transition through some of these things. In 2018 and 2017 and 2016, we looked at the challenges that really required our board of directors to evaluate our core values and our mission statement. And we've been working on it ever since. We changed our board chair last year. We got more coaches. We got a consultant. We got people to help us. We got some tremendous pro bono help. We had people who were lawyers as well as philanthropists who had opinions. We solicited all that support from our community, and we looked at it as support as opposed to opinion or actionable things that we had to do. And we came up with a document that transitioned our core values from the more traditional core values like community or safety or teamwork into really four primary areas that drove a story that tells the story of CRI. And again, not to speak of CRI as a role model. We have much that we have to work on and improve. These core values are literally months old, so it's not as if we have done much with them. And I think that's an important part of the pacing when you're talking about your boards. I shared the document with Chris. I don't know if you can put it up or share the screen. Last time I tried to do that, I wasn't successful. But
which one do you want up? I'll get it while you're talking.
Just the core values document.
All right, I'll put that up while you're talking.
Okay. So what we did was, again, in sort of the course of looking case study wise, the board solicited input from our community, from our staff. They had retreats that were no nonsense retreats, meaning they didn't sequester themselves with a lot of delicious food and a comfortable place. They came to the boathouse. We sat down for hours at a time with a whiteboard, and we talked through some of the ways that we wanted to organize our values that would reflect actionable and, importantly, measurable ways that we can make sure that we're serving our mission. So if you look at the cascade from the mission of the organization to the core values to what you're going to actually measure as an organization to see whether you're doing a good job or not. And those 3 steps were the 3 steps that guided the process for us as an overall architecture. Our first core value, and I'll just go through them very quickly. First one is diversity. And the reason we picked diversity is because of the statement in our mission, which says that we invite individuals of all backgrounds, abilities, and experience to grow through the experience of rowing. And for us, the concept of diversity is the opportunity to open the door. People should have the opportunity to row. And we believe that the sport and our lives are enriched by making sure that this is an opportunity for anybody who wants to try it to do it. You'll notice that and just a quick sort of sidebar here, you see that you understand that we value something, but we also want to share what we believe about that value, what it means to us, and then also behaviors and guiding principles that we're going to use to actually enact and embody our values. And with regard to diversity, the actionable steps around that are evolutionary, right? They're not just, we're going to know that we've done it and we've achieved a value when. All of those steps are aspirational and evolutionary. The next one is belonging and respect. So if we're going to create an organization that sort of invites individuals of backgrounds, abilities, and experience that is diverse, we not only have to invite them, but we have to make them feel that they belong. It's not just about being respectful to people. Going back to basically everything that Delany said about how you create an environment that actually enables people to thrive, they have to feel that they belong. And that begins with respect, but it also begins with their definition of what it means for them to belong in an environment, not for us to divine how they're going to experience rowing. Excellent comments about erging, excellent comments about making sure that you do in fact respect the religious tradition or the familial tradition or the social pressures that people feel around actually having this sport enrich their life. They have to feel that they belong when they say, this is how I want to experience the sport. In order for us to do that, the next step that the board took was to understand that this is a growing and a learning process for people. So we're not a teaching organization, but in order for us to thrive, we have to be learners. We can't be a consequence-oriented organization. So growing through learning and growing through rowing is a basis for us to make sure that we embrace and cultivate an ethos where when we learn something that's uncomfortable, it actually helps us because we value the diversity of that opinion. We don't just take it in and say, cool, we're gonna make a policy, or we're gonna make a checkbox that allows us to say that we talked about it and we're gonna move on. And then really the last one for us was resilience. And resilience means that you have you face challenge in rowing. And probably the biggest thing that came out of the discussion around resilience was that our staff faced challenges, and our board wanted to recognize that these values are actually both for the people that row in our organization and also who work in our organization. And so we have to have an environment where we actually, as rowing leaders, create an organization that embraces the intersection of those two things in a way that actually enables them to feel that if they come from a diverse background, they belong in the organization, and they're going to get something by being associated with us. They're going to continue to learn and evolve. And that requires resilience. It requires a little bit of grit. It requires making sure that when you're faced with whatever it is, launch keys are lost, you got to go get your own gas, or you got to wake up really early in the morning because that's the only time your program is offered, and you have to sign out at a time that you don't necessarily want to. There's cooperation and there's connection to the core nature of what the organization is trying trying to give you and trying to enable you to gain. I added, for the purposes of this also, I think some people might be also looking, and I just have one more sort of quick summary piece of this that I want to share around action items that people want to see. I think it's important when we're talking about boards and board development. My feeling is boards really work in 3 or 4 different sort of time planes, going from the least optimal to the best or the most optimal. The first plane is the urgent. Okay, so something happened, the board needs to respond, it's urgent, it's adrenal. What do we want our boards to do now about this particular issue? We have to put out a statement. We've got to get on social media and broadcast a thing. Our board has to recognize that there is a problem, going back to sort of the challenge of both having the difficult conversation about how we got here, as well as how we're going to actually solve this stuff. That could feel very urgent, or it could be long-term. But the thing that we want to recognize for boards is that that's a very uncomfortable space for them to be in. There are short-term, obviously, mid-term, and long-term strategies for boards. And I think as leaders of organizations that either are trying to encourage people to come into our boards or want board members to feel like they can make a difference, we have to be able to frame some of the things that we're talking about this evening and in the national conversation and help our boards digest the pacing at which that has to happen. Because boards don't generally want to respond if they meet once a month, just be in sort of problem-solving mode all the time. They're actually trying to help the long-term vision and the long-term viability and obviously the financial stability of the organization. So one of the things that I did in this process was speak with the strategic planning group and our board about making sure that we were constantly going back to the long term. Yes, there are things we have to fix now. Yes, there are some things that we really need to change either on the management side or even within our board or within our organization that might feel like they have to be solved today. They're super hard. And it's really hard work to understand how your values are going to fit your mission, and they're going to embrace the entirety of the organization, both in the here and now and where you want your organization to go. And I think I'll just finish with the idea that boards function best when they're focused on the longest term vision for the organization and the most aspirational facet of that, and that you can be their partner in putting in programs or putting in policies or putting in the infrastructure around the architecture that your board can provide. Like Delany, I'm happy to talk to people. I speak with people pretty regularly. And if people have questions, I'm happy to continue the conversation.
Ted, thanks so much for that. Looking next, we have Will Bott, and Will's going to talk about an actual program that he's created that is working quite well in Milwaukee. And I think, Will, while you're introducing yourself, I'm going to, if you don't mind, I'm going to put it up on the screen. And everybody on the call, you should have gotten an email from me that has all this stuff, all these documents, and what Ted was just talking about, but also with what Will's about to. So, Will, if you want to get going on that, I'll start.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks. Chris, you can hear me, right? I've been having some Wi-Fi issues, but we're good.
I hear you fine. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, cool. First, I just want to say I am so excited that this is a topic that we're talking about. And this is something that has been a really important part of our club at the Milwaukee Rowing Club for the past few years. And it's something that we've had to talk through, think through, and kind of try to figure out why year after year we show up at different races as the Milwaukee Rowing Club, and we look nothing like the city we say we represent. And looking at a bunch of other teams across the country, I think I'm in company with you guys as like rowing right now is seen as and really is a sport that is mostly made up of suburban white kids. And for us, this was an issue. It's like, how can we figure this out? And, because we also have, we want to be inclusive for everybody. We want, we have financial aid. We have all these different sort of like, the door is open, but we still didn't have people coming through the door. And that was a really, we kind of thought, what are we doing wrong? It could be, it's not as expensive for some kids and blah, blah, blah. And we realized that there were a few main barriers that, if addressed correctly and well, really bring kids through the door, just like anybody else. And so right now at the Milwaukee Rowing Club, we have about 50 kids, nearly half of whom are from our STEM to Stern program. Now, the way that our STEM to Stern program works is we partner with schools in underserved neighborhoods, and we build relationships with teachers, with the administrators there, and then we start to talk about rowing in schools. And we say, hey, here's the Milwaukee Rowing Club. We have the ability to kind of get you rowing if that's something you're interested in. And so we go to a number of different middle schools that we have relationships with, and we then offer kind of the main barriers that we found were transportation and swimming. Those were the two main things. And these last 3 years, we've been able to find ways to provide transportation and to provide swimming lessons. Now, Chris, would you like me to kind of go through this in a quick way, or just kind of like give a broader overview?
Why don't we do this? Why don't we do a broad overview? You tell me when you want to switch, and if people have questions, then by all means, everybody ask away while we have Will right here.
Yeah.
Will, before we get started, let me just say this. Mark asked a question about anything specific to master's programs, and I think the answer to that is virtually everything that Delany and Ted talked about weren't age specific. They were about top-down changes, top-down ways of thinking about things, whether it be juniors or masters or any programming that you have. I think the values and all that are applicable to all, not just specific to junior. Now, this one, what we're about to talk about, is a junior oriented one. So, but I did want to say that the concepts that we've spoken about so far aren't held down to any age group. So, with that, Will, why don't you tell me when you want to move forward, but feel free.
Yeah, cool. So basically, when we first started this 3 years ago, we were going to high schools, bringing ergs, saying, hey, try this out, do a little erg competition. And high schoolers would show up and they would see right away what rowing is all about. And we found that a lot of high schoolers would show up, come one time, and figure that this really isn't for me. And we were trying to think about, okay, what else can we do? And we thought, okay, let's focus on middle school students. And middle school students show up and they show up in the same way. And it's like, that's a huge boathouse. We've got super big boats. This is a really cool sport. And we've seen more engagement from middle school students who now have been around for a couple of years, are now graduating up to our high school team. And these are kids from underserved neighborhoods who identify as rowers, want to row in high school, want to row in college. They love rowing. And it's a really amazing thing that we've built. And it really is like 8 components. And so maybe Chris, if you want to kind of move to that next page. Yeah, so there are really 8 main components that STEM to Stern provides. Now and that STEM to Stern really it needs. The first thing is you have to partner with schools. Rowing clubs, if you're out there and you're looking for new ways to bring kids from underserved neighborhoods, increase diversity, just kind of increase your participation. We've found that partnering with schools is a really, really important step. The second thing is transportation. there are a lot of kids who are coming from single parent homes. And there are a lot of parents who are working day in and day out. And transportation is just not an option for a lot of the kids that we're working with. By providing transportation, we eliminate that barrier and make it possible for them to get to practice and to participate. The next thing is, and Delany mentioned this earlier, swimming lessons. Swimming is a skill that, many of us grow up just kind of knowing how to swim, but that doesn't exist in a lot of the communities that we're working with. And for obviously rowing purposes, safety purposes, life skill purposes, offering swimming lessons is a really important part to building this program. We offer, our program offers STEM education. It's called STEM to Stern. Many of the kids that we're working with are also, they're behind in math, ELA, and that sort of thing. So STEM, we've found, is a really great way to get kids engaged, get kids moving, thinking, using big words, learning, and that's a really important thing for our program. Obviously, rowing, the rowing club, it needs to exist, and there are a ton of rowing clubs out there, ton of middle school programs out there, and for us, it's very important that we're able to provide a really positive environment, a positive culture. A focus of ours is, in Milwaukee, for instance. Milwaukee is one of the most segregated cities in the country. But on Tuesdays and Thursdays at the Milwaukee Rowing Club, it's one of the most integrated places that I can possibly think of. And so what we do at the Rowing Club, we are all about breaking the barriers that exist in our city, as well as getting kids out of their comfort zone, getting kids out of their shell, building new relationships, pushing each other, pushing themselves, and really just kind of breaking down the barriers that exist in our city. We do this in a number of ways, pairing people up in with different groups and kind of doing team exercises, that sort of thing. The last two, we have food. Our program is basically an after school to swimming lessons, to rowing with the Milwaukee Rowing Club, to back home in the evening. And so snacks are pretty necessary. I have a full slide about that because we have found that that's actually a pretty big deal. And then the last one, financial support. For the Milwaukee Rowing Club, this has been a really amazing thing to see our club, our board, our parents just come through. And I was talking with a couple board members a few months ago after we had a big fundraiser for the STEM to Stern program at the Milwaukee Rowing Club, and they were saying, we've always tried to figure something out. We've always, kind of thought this would be a cool thing. We had no idea how to do it. And this is amazing that it exists, and we want to support it, and we will support it. So I think for coaches, for members of rowing clubs, for people who are in the rowing space and who are attached to a certain rowing club, the program that we've created, we sort of figured out like the million ways not to do this rowing program over the last few years. It went from, me picking up kids to taking them to practice and then driving them home to, okay, well, we need to grow this and it's not sustainable. Let's get some transportation. And so we figured that out. We got a van, a driver. Now we're picking kids up, taking them to practice, taking them to swimming lessons, taking them home. Our STEM part really entered in when colleges got interested in what we were doing. And the Milwaukee School of Engineering, they have a club rowing team, and they approached us and they said, this is amazing. We want to get involved. How can we help? And so now they're involved, and they have vans, and the collegiate rowers are the volunteers who are picking kids up for practice, mentoring, and it's just been a really cool thing for us to work on, to figure out. It will take it. I mean, it takes obviously a ton of time, a ton of effort to put these into place. But really, the 8 components that are written up there, those will not only just open the door, say, you know, here's the, you know, come row, we're for everyone. We realize that there are more barriers for many students, especially from underserved neighborhoods, that have barriers that are go unaddressed year after year after year, and it's a priority for our club in Milwaukee to be as competitive as possible, and we have only gotten much faster because of this program. We have way more kids participating. It's more competitive. We have way more athletes, and you know, kids are pushing, and they're pushing together, and it's a really cool thing. This isn't like a separate club, you know. It's not like it's on the actual, like, it's on our actual rowing team. We've just figured out some of the main barriers and tried to address them the best way possible. So for us, I mean, our next steps are looking to expand, looking to get even more kids involved, build this even higher and bigger, but also for us to partner with other rowing teams. This has been such an amazing thing for Milwaukee, for the city. There's been, you know, some exciting stories that are coming out, and people in the community know that this exists, and it's a really positive thing. But we're looking to, you know, use rowing, which is just such a unique sport, in forcing people to work together and figure it out and push hard. And I mean, you guys know all the positives that rowing can bring about, but we're hoping to just make this accessible, and you know, hopefully get rowing, bringing people together in communities all over the country.
Will, there's a question. What is the breakdown between male and female in the STEM program?
That's a great question. So let me say, so this idea was, this started 4 years ago. And at that point, I was working in a Milwaukee public school in an area that was completely underserved. And I built some really strong relationships with some of the middle schoolers there. They were all boys at that point. And so those boys became rowers, and they invited their friends who were boys. For us, that was cool, you know, in some ways, because like they start bringing their friends and the whole thing. But we wanted to expand to girls, and so we tried to kind of figure out, okay, how can we get more girls? And then there's the kind of the logistics of, you know, when you have the boys and girls, and there's the transportation stuff and trying to figure all that out. We ended up having a few sisters of the boys join the team. But I will say right now in our STEM to Stern program, it's mostly boys. And is something that, I mean, for us, that's another step that we're going to be taking. We're looking to partner. There's another school that we're looking to partner with that is an all-girls school in an underserved neighborhood on the south side of Milwaukee. And we're looking to kind of get into that school so we can partner with them and provide rowing to the girls at that school.
A couple more questions, Will, since we have you nailed down. First, a comment. I think you're going to need tomorrow to catch up on all the people who want to reach out to you and have questions for you. So is your email or your contact on this PowerPoint?
It's not, but please, I mean, this is something that I would love to discuss and love to help out with in any way I can. So please feel free to publicly put that out or add that I can add that too. So
yeah, why don't you put it right in the chat? Are you a teacher? Do you coach rowing full time, or do you also have a day job?
Yeah, so I'm the head boys coach at the Milwaukee Rowing Club. So I coach the high school boys team. I've been doing that for 8 years now. I was a teacher for a couple of years, and then we really started doing. We started putting this program together. And anyway, I was a paraprofessional, so not a teacher, a teaching assistant for a couple of years. In that space, I really wanted that experience of working in the schools, building relationships, getting out of my comfort zone as well. It was the most incredible, difficult, amazing, hard, kind of, you name it. It was everything for a couple of years. But yeah, rowing is really the focus for me, and using rowing to really break the segregation that is in our city. That's what's been so cool about this program, and that's my goal with this is using rowing, using this program to integrate rowing clubs that have historically been segregated, white, and suburban.
Robert wants to know if you can share some of the STEM lessons built into the program. Is it easier if they reach out to you, and if some people reach out?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Please reach out. So we do the Lego robotics. That's what we've been doing the last 2 years. I think that STEM is such a broad sphere. And so, I think for programs who are interested in some sort of, thing that is, facilitating this, I think STEM can be a pretty broad area. And so whether that's Lego League, robotics, or whether that's, gardening, or whether that is, some sort of expertise that, somebody at your club has. We've found that any sort of academic, with an academic focus that still gets kids moving, that still gets kids outside, and it kind of gets them thinking, and that sort of thing is best.
Well, this is an awesome, what you've created is amazing. And as Katrin says, amazing that you say there's a million ways to do it wrong, and yet you still go after it and try. Thanks for sharing all this. I think you're going to get a lot of people reaching out. We had a grant writing session. Every couple of Saturdays we have a grant writing session as a webinar. And one of the things that they were talking about is other people that are always looking. Well, many people have found always willing to collaborate is the YMCA across the country, and that what rowing offers is a lot of times what the YMCA can't provide, but want to in terms of programming. So there's a great access there. And then you talk about the pool, you talk about swimming and getting swim lessons in the pool and all that, another aspect of this. I was going to, if you guys haven't looked this up or seen this, and I don't know if I'm going to do this right, if you've ever Googled, I won't even try it. If you just Google percentages of swimming in the various groups, it's amazing to see the reality of what the studies have shown for about who can swim and who can't swim, and who's inclined to learn how to swim and stuff. So that the water is a barrier. Just the fear of the water itself is a barrier. When I started looking into it a couple of days ago, I was simply amazed. It came up in one of the YMCA talks, and so I was like, oh, how bad could the disparity be? And then when I Googled it, I was just something I took for granted my whole life, that we just grew up swimming. Like it wasn't a question or a discussion. Like, yeah, we grew up swimming. And so I think that for people who want to institute programs that have further reach, you're going to have to understand the obstacles that you. Like for me, I never would have understood that as an obstacle, because it, just didn't. I thought all kids learned how to swim, and it was a moment of holy mackerel. Will, that's so that's a tangible program, everybody, and I'll bet you in 1,400 programs across the country, there's a lot of incredibly brilliant people out there, and part of tonight was to say, instead of looking outwardly for the answer, somebody to give us an answer, like we've got to look within, and there are plenty of answers there. You know, like we're just not trying. To think that we don't know what the answer is, it's just that we're not trying. And all of a sudden it's, you know, it's the thing to do is to try the last couple of weeks. Well, hell, we're, you know, 100 years late. Like it's time to get moving forward and look within. And so I also think that that leads me to Matt Logue. And what Max is going to talk about is none of this matters if we don't follow through and make lasting changes. None of it. We can talk every night on webinars, but if we don't follow through and we don't act and we don't make lasting changes, you know, you just wasted all the minutes of your evening. So I'm going to turn that over to Matt. And Matt, thank you for jumping in here. Hey, Will, thanks a lot, man. That's great.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Chris, and thanks, Will, Ted, and Delany. I mean, these resources have just been incredible. I mean, you guys are a tough act to follow here, but as Chris was saying too, like none of this means anything if we can't follow through. We have all these resources, we have all this emotion and passion to move forward with right now, and now we need to channel that into following through. And in my opinion, one of the best ways to make sure that it's a long-term and successful follow-through is to really understand and embrace the expectations that come with the responsibility of diving into these initiatives. We need to embrace the fact that this is going to be a long-term investment, a long-term commitment by each of us as individuals and leaders within our organization, a long-term commitment by our boards and the vision of the organizations. I was saying earlier, you know, diversity inclusion, it's not available on Amazon Prime and it can't be delivered to your door in 2 days. We have to embrace the challenge that comes with the long-term commitment and put all of these ideas and this passion and this energy into the tangible products. We need to expect that along the way, we're going to make mistakes. God knows I've made countless mistakes, almost daily mistakes throughout this process. And we have to just embrace those mistakes so that we can effectively learn from them and continue to have that growth mindset so that we're always learning, always evolving, always listening to be better and come back better and stronger and make the ideas work with inside the environment that we each have. Each one of our boathouses and campuses is a unique environment where we can take, and it's not necessarily plug and play. We have to be able to take and evolve these ideas and these programs and these resources to our unique environment. And that takes trial and error, but it's worth it. And you have to commit to that growth, and you got to commit to those mistakes so that you can follow through and have that lasting program. And then you got to understand the expectations of the community as well. And that's multi-leveled. It's your own community. What are the expectations within your own boathouse now? What are the masters expecting? What are the youth expecting? And how do you merge those together to make sure that everybody's on the same page and committed to this moving forward? The long-term stability that the communities are looking for in this. Rowing's a new sport. People have touched on it all night that, you know, not many people have had access. So when they come in and see that, okay, this looks cool. Okay, now it's on water and we have to address the swimming. This water is anywhere from 3 feet to potentially 300 feet deep. So you want to make sure that when people come in, they feel safe. And by investing in the long-term stability of the staff and the communication that goes along with it, you're building trust, you're building rapport, and making people feel comfortable from the moment that they meet you and know that the program's going to be safe, that you're going to be welcoming, and that it's going to be a positive experience. And when you build that trust and have that authenticity, it's going to resonate within the communities. And as Will was saying, it started off with a couple boys and they told their friends. Rowing's best recruiters, word of mouth. And when people say like, yeah, trust these guys, that's going to resonate, and you're going to see more people showing up at the doorstep. And then having the transparency of the entire operation and just being completely upfront with people is just going to reinforce that trust. and it's going to make the follow through easier. Instead of fighting people, you're collaborating with people. Instead of fighting fears, you're working through the fears and conquering those together. And then with that comes tangible progression. It's not going to be fast. It's going to take time. But as you develop those metrics and track those metrics and can show people, the communities, the participants, the foundations that may be interested in supporting this, the colleges, the potential investors, it's going to just make everybody's job that much easier and allow the impact to be that much greater. So expectations can be scary. Everybody wants to do things right now, but if we can effectively embrace that this is a long-term commitment and embrace and put the language to the impact of that commitment, we're already halfway there, and it's just going to keep building on itself progressively. And it takes time, but it's worth every single second.
Well, I'd like to ask each of the panelists a question on behalf of my boss, Susan Smith. What role do you see U.S. Rowing playing to increase diversity and help clubs provide an inclusive environment to the community? How do we help organizations? So, Matt, you're still alive. Why don't you go first?
I think you guys announced a big component of it today, and it comes with coaching education and making that more accessible to more individuals throughout the country. It's been mentioned earlier, having a coach that looks like the communities that you want to serve is going to help open those doors and get more people to come through them. So investing in those coaches, giving that opportunity to grow and expand there, I think is a very key way in which U.S. Rowing can help increase the diversity of the sport.
And for those of you who don't know, we, for obvious reasons with COVID, have pivoted to virtual coaching seminars. So our level 2 and level 3 coaching will now be online. It'll be virtual. And any member of our rowing community that would like to become certified at level 2 and then also level 3 is welcome. There are no fees for anybody who qualifies under the America Rows. And so we're opening the doors and we're trying to get more people. We're trying to get everybody better and keep our kids safer and healthier. But we're also, so those were opened up today. Level 2 was opened up today. Level 3 will be in the next day or two. So there's that. Will, what do you think about that question?
Yeah. So I guess I mean, personally, and I guess for Milwaukee, at least the Milwaukee Rowing Club, we've kind of looked in the mirror and we've tried to figure out, okay, what can we do as a club to kind of work to figure some of these issues out. I think for U.S. Rowing, discussions like this, being a mouthpiece that is really amplifying what is going on in the community, encouraging, when they see clubs that are not maybe taking things as, maybe not looking in the mirror as much. I think pushing towards having more clubs be working toward, using rowing to break barriers and bring people together. I think that's one thing that U.S. Rowing can do. I think there's a lot of kind of looking in the mirror though that has to happen at individual clubs. You said 1,400 clubs. That's a lot of looking in the mirror, and I think U.S. Rowing can kind of help facilitate that. Things like this are really cool and good, but I think it's on us as well. So.
Delany.
Honestly, I do. I want to echo what Will said. Definitely amplifying voices of people doing really incredible things. But I think specifically amplifying voices of color within the rowing community again and again, and just not stopping putting those voices out there. And then I think kind of not something more tangible, but I do really think just much more transparency and really saying like, we're not just holding ourselves accountable, we're holding all of you accountable, because US Rowing isn't just the organization that falls under that title. US Rowing is all of the rowers in the US. And so holding everyone accountable to creating the change that we say we want, then we actually have to hold each other to that standard together.
You know, we spoke earlier, Delany, about you know, diversity and inclusion, and some people may not even have a policy, right? And one of the things that we're thinking about is to renew your organizational membership. You have to have a safe sport policy. You have to have a safety policy. You know, so we've been talking about the idea of having you need to have a diversity policy, you know, an inclusion policy. If you haven't thought about it yet, you should be, and make that part of, if you want to register as a member organization, we're gonna have a look at it along with your safe sport policy, and make you thinking about it, get you thinking about it, and some accountability there. So you know, when Delany was just talking about accountability, that's that point that came to mind. So Ted, let's have your answer, and then my friend Craig White is here to talk about something from earlier. So you're still on mute, Ted.
Sorry about that, guys. First and foremost, I think we covered some of the really important bases. Educating our coaches, amplifying and celebrating the successes, I think, is massive. The commitment to accountability and transparency is ridiculously hard for an organization as complex and large as US Rowing. I think it's hard work, and it's something that can continue. But I would say also, US Rowing, Chris was talking about this a little earlier, and I had the benefit of taking a look at some of the materials through the course of the process. You know, there's a lot of work that's already been done by US Rowing. So the hard work to actually communicate and provide people the resources is already out there. Our national governing body has actually done a pretty good job of that stuff, but it's just been muted. And I think the organizations would benefit from understanding more about what our NGB has done to actually the thought that they've already put into it, and share that more openly. I think it's been sidelined with crises that all of us face, whether they're financial, whether they're COVID, whether they're whatever that comes up through the course of a quad. There's a lot of work that's been done. I just would love to see it out there more. Is really the only thing I would add to what's already been said. Haha, now you're muted.
Now I'm muted. So I just didn't want you to be alone on that, Ted. So I got you. So Craig White is a friend of mine who coaches in Northern New Jersey, and we were texting a little bit through this. And one of the things, Craig, that you brought up about a limiting factor was transportation. And so I was wondering if you wouldn't mind, talking about some of the limiting factors that you found in your coaching, things that we can work on and find ways around.
No, absolutely. Our program is in Newark, New Jersey. And we row in the Passaic at Kearney Boathouse, which is 4.1 miles away from our school. So our kids literally run. They run to Kearney Boathouse so that they can practice. We throw all of their book bags, and duffel bags and gym gear into one of our cars, and then we just meet them there. And that's just a reality because there aren't enough buses at our school to be able to provide transportation back and forth. I think there are like 4 buses shared between the 13 programs at our high school. So there's no other way. The kids, it's either run or you don't practice on the water. And then we have the opposite problem at the end of practice because a lot of kids are either uncomfortable or because their parents are working, like Coach Bott said earlier, where they literally just struggle to get home. So we'll pack the kids into the vehicles, or sometimes I've had to arrange Ubers with parents to be able to get kids back to get back to school. So there are a lot of barriers to entry, if you will, to just being able to have a water practice. A lot of things that in college, when I rowed, I just didn't have to think about, because, you know, there's a huge difference between being a college rower and being 14, 15, 17 years old, especially if you're in the middle of a city. So.
Thanks, Craig. Thanks for coming on. Yeah, did you want to say something, Ted? You're on mute again.
I'm sorry. I'm trying just to be respectful. Sorry about that. It's been mentioned a couple times, and I don't know the demographics of the audience, but one thing that came out of a discussion that happened in Boston last night, again, we're atypical because of the number of universities and organizations that support rowing. But what Craig said sort of made me think about just the amount of collaboration that can happen with local universities that are also organizations. There was some amazing stuff that came out of the coaches of the Charles River talking to the clubs of Charles River about collaborating together rather than having CRI have its program, Cambridge Boat Club and the head of the Charles having theirs. MIT has a STEM program that has been around for 10 or 15 years. It's tiny, but holy moly, like taking a STEM program at MIT for a high school athlete would be pretty freaking cool. And how do we partner together with the resources that are already happening? You know, one of the college coaches said, heck, you guys need transportation. We've got a university full of passenger vans and certified van drivers. And so I want to offer that as a way for more thinking as opposed to modeling, but an opportunity for people to think about, and what Craig said around, you know, being creative about how you get athletes to and from is really more collaborative than overcoming a budget issue. None of this is about money. It's about creativity and commitment to what we're doing.
Thanks, Ted. I wanted to take a moment and when this started happening a couple weeks ago, I reached out to a guy named Paul Hoffman. I don't know if many of you know who he is. In 1968, he was the coxswain for the Harvard men's 8. That 8 went on to the Olympics in 1968 to Mexico City. And they became very involved with Black athletes and what was happening in the 60s and the late 60s. And so what we got to have a couple conversations, which were great. And he was trying to explain what it was like then. And you know, it's amazing 52 years later, we're having similar conversations now. And he said that he shared with me something that Harry Parker used to say. And I thought it was really, really cool. And then he applied it to now. And so if you don't mind, I'll take the liberty of just reading this real quick. This is what he wrote. As Harry Parker always used to say when talking about rowing, especially in larger boats, and I paraphrase, it's hard and it's not fun. It's not like running around and kicking balls or shooting baskets or swinging a golf club. That's fun. Rowing is many, many hours of hard, repetitious work done out of the public view without much encouragement, all aimed at getting ready for a few very short competitions, which are often held without a lot of spectators. Rowers row for other reasons, and greater rewards than having fun are being celebrated, for sure. What we get from the sport is the immense satisfaction of testing one's strength of commitment and discipline against the harshest judge, oneself. All the while building lasting connections with those we do the same work for, those with whom we do the same work for their own reasons. Building respect by recognizing each individual's differences, even when all in the crew are seeking the same result. And then he went on to tie it to nowadays. None of what needs to be done by society right now will be easy, and not much of it will be fun. Like rowing, there will need to be a long period of training and practice before one will meet with success. And there will be little applause or cheering, and there shouldn't be much. However, if rowers and coxswains and rowing coaches don't understand this, then damn few other athletes will. But we do, and with that knowledge, that discipline, and that persistence, we will meet with success. And I just thought that that was a neat, you know, Harry used to say that in the 60s, and having the whole crew do this in 1968 and having the connection with the coxswain to that crew. And, you know, like, it's not, what is in front of us is not going to be easy. It's going to be hard as hell. and it's not going to be fun. And if we truly want to face what's out there, that we need to move the needle and we need to make changes. So going back to the beginning of this conversation, the first thing pointed out was there were all white people on this panel. And there are 1,400 plus clubs in the country. The vast, vast majority probably run by a whole bunch of white people. And in a sport that has been, as pointed out, predominantly white. So there aren't going to be a lot of pats on the shoulders. There's going to be a lot of awkward moments and tough truths that's to talk about. So I hope that we've started a conversation tonight, that we can use each other as resources, and we can help each other and push each other, and as Delany said, hold each other accountable. I think that what is the Lao Tzu? The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. Is that I believe what Lao Tzu said? And so maybe this is just one step forward. But Anita de France once told a friend of mine that if you have to follow through, and here we are. So let's look ahead to following through and supporting each other along the way. I think there's another question here. Let's see what we got. Post that quote. Okay. Now we're getting into some technical skills that one of us may or may not have. I will, hold on. Okay. All right. Fine. I'll find it again. I'll put it in the chat. If I'll just cut and paste it, if that's all right. Are there any other questions or anything that any of you all would like to say? I can't thank you all enough for being here. This is not an easy topic, and the strength that you guys are showing to be here and lead cannot be understated. So I appreciate all of you for that. And I'd appreciate it if one of you could show me how to use cut and paste. Delany, why can't I be a millennial? And don't say 25 years, because I will be so upset if you say that. So it's in the chat room right now if you want to cut and paste it from that. Again, that was the Coxswain from 1968 talking about his memories from his coach, Harry Parker, and how applicable and how poignant to talk about rowers, because that's what we are. That's who we are. So we need to be better. Craig, thanks for joining us. I love getting to see you. I didn't get to see you at any races, so I'm glad to get to see you now.
No Saratoga this year.
Hey, don't worry. We haven't gotten rid of Saratoga, so you'll be back. I'll be waiting for you. Everybody, thanks so much for tonight. These kinds of meetings are things that we can do regularly. I don't mean every night. I just mean like periodically. We could all touch base. We could all check in. We could all share. We can start these groups. It's very little work, and it would be the ripples that we could cause could go coast to coast. So let's be that person collectively. So thank you all for joining us. Oh, hold on, there's two more in here. Let's see what we got. It cut off the end of the quote. Oh, Colin, did it really? Okay, all right. All right, I'll send it out to everybody. How's that? I'll send it out to everybody, and I'll let you all get back to your lives. Be well, everybody. Be safe. We'll see you all soon.
Chris, one quick shout out. Seize the Oar does have an upcoming para-rowing global meetup on June 23rd, and that's certainly a large part of the diversity conversation. So hop on that call as well. Absolutely.
Thank you, Tara, for putting that in there. Yeah, let's support each other in every way we can. Take care, everybody. Have a